back again. Episode 70.
70? That's
moly.
awesome.
Jeez.
Yeah,
Best theme song in the business, by the way.
Yes, best in the business. Only ones in the business,
Well,
but also the best in the business.
First place. That's the way it works.
All right, well, welcome to the program, Mr. Jed Johnson. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to it, brother.
Yeah, man, me too. Because as I just said to you offline, we're always talking about hand strength, and arm wrestlers know something about it, but we thought it'd be fun to have someone who's really committed a good part of his physical life to mastering hand and grip strength, and I couldn't think of anyone better than you, so that's why I invited you, man.
Thanks, man.
So we expect you to be a complete genius the whole time, okay?
Listen, I'm going to dazzle you with something tonight, whether it's good quality information or a bunch of BS. You will be dazzled.
Hey, it's what we
That
specialize in. That's how it works.
So how did you end up starting off in grip sports anyway?
It really was 2003. I happened to find out about a grip contest that was going on in Pennsylvania in Punxsutawney, and I was already training for a strongman contest that I was going to be competing in, and I figured any improvements in grip that I could make would be helpful for that. So really, initially grip was secondary, and strongman was going to be the primary objective, and eventually things got turned around. But yeah, that's how I found out about it. It was on the Dr. Squat forum way back in the beginning of 2003.
And so basically you started doing the grip stuff and it turned out that you had like an affinity for it, or did you notice that was something you were particularly good at quickly?
Yeah, yes and no. I guess probably the first thing I found out about was the feat of ripping a deck of cards.
Okay.
And previous to that, I think I might have even found out about the Captains of Crush Grippers. But I didn't really get interested in anything until I found out about the decks of cards. I thought it was like a trick. I thought it was just something magicians did, and there was some kind of doctoring that was taking place with the cards. But I found out that it was actually legit and it could be done. So when I went to the store, picked up a deck of cards that were right by the checkout aisle at one of the big stores. And it was like $2.99 a pack, so I just figured that's what cards cost. You can get them a lot cheaper. But what I didn't realize is those are impulse buy cards, and along with being real expensive, they're actually really, really high quality cards. So it literally took me 2 weeks of attempts to get one deck torn. So it was kind of actually pathetic. So as far as like feats of strength are concerned, I was not good. I guess I was all right as far as my grip being okay for like carrying farmers or doing rows or pull-ups or something like that. I mean, I've never dropped a deadlift, so I guess I had a pretty good grip that way. But as far as applying it to some of the advanced technique, I wasn't really anything special. I mean, I couldn't close a number one COC number one gripper when I was first introduced to the grippers. So, but I got obsessed with it, and one thing led to another, and eventually I started going to more and more contests, trying more and more feats, and I just got good over time.
Yeah, it's a very similar story to most arm wrestlers, to be honest with you, because most of us are like, oh, it's some kind of magic trick. These guys aren't very strong. And then we go to our first practice and we're like, fuck, these guys are really strong.
Yeah.
And we have very similar experiences where we feel very pathetic. So it sounds like a very similar experience.
Yeah. Well, when I first started, there was almost no information online. If you wanted any information, you had to get one of the books that John Brookfield wrote at the time. So those were the only real resources aside from just a handful of websites. I mean, 2002, 2003, if you think about it, the internet was still very, very new. And there weren't even a lot of message boards or anything. And if there were message boards, they were very, very primitive and hard to find anything. So you couldn't really research on them. So it was definitely a different time. So it was just I just tried to find as much information as I could, and then just tried to apply it. So I read everything. I used to be a member of every single board, every single forum, just because there might be a thread that popped up that would give a tip about grippers or pinching or something like that. Mm-hmm. So I would scour the internet.
I did the same thing as you. I have Brookfield's books, and I pretty much bought everything ironmind.com had on gripping before I got back into arm wrestling. And, I was trying all the Captains of Crushed grippers too. And then you're right. It was really hard to find information even 10 years ago about that kind of stuff. It was a little bit frustrating. But so what do you think your best grip at sport of? Lucas Raymond is giving you some crap on here already. That's not a surprise.
That's to be expected. What insecure people will generally take shots at awesome people. So
I think that's true. He wants to know who your best training partner is.
Oh, without a doubt, it's him. Most people couldn't last more than 2 weeks training with me because I guess I'm just too intense. And he's the only person in the last probably 7 years that actually put like weights away before they left. Before that, the gym would be covered in chalk and grip implements would be scattered everywhere, and I'd have to spend like an extra hour putting everything away. So I was very impressed when he came and actually put a few plates away.
Well, let's talk about Lucas a little bit because he's a cool guy. He's a pretty good arm wrestler too. When you have someone like Lucas come in who's already very naturally strong and is committed like that, what kind of progression do you take people through to develop their grip?
Well, usually like the initial progression that I do with people is I show them like some of the most basic feats, and I make sure they're things that pretty much anybody can complete. And then when they complete them, I usually oversell it, like, holy cow, do you know what you just did, bro? And, that kind of, they kind of feed off that intensity and the endorphins, I guess, or whatever. Mm-hmm. So, but I didn't have to do that with him because he actually, I think, was able to close like a number 1 or a number 2 gripper like early on. Mm-hmm. And then like he borrowed one of my grippers and took it with him. And I said the same thing that I've told half a dozen other people: just take this gripper and work the set. You got to work the set, and then once you know the set, you'll be able to move up in grippers. And he actually took the gripper home and used it. It didn't just sit in this bag. He came back like the next workout and was able to actually set the gripper. Mm-hmm. So. He's kind of like me in that my mentor that I originally first started training with would tell me the same thing, and I'd go home and actually do it. And I was like the 8th guy that he told to do that, and I was the only one that ever did that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So, it's nice to see a little bit of yourself in someone else.
Okay. I think that's enough praise for Lucas for tonight.
Yeah, it's killing me.
No, but seriously, with the grippers, this is something that comes up frequently. Do you think that they are a good tool for developing grip strength, or are they more of a testing?
I don't know. The thing about grippers, in my opinion, is they just don't cross over to anything else very well. Mm-hmm. So, like, if just working a gripper, in the full range of motion, for instance, it's not really going to I don't see it carrying over to anything else. So, I think it's a good way to condition your hands, and naturally, it's going to strengthen your hands because you're working over a resistance that you normally wouldn't be able to just do. Mm-hmm. So it is a way, obviously, to strengthen your hands, but I'd much rather see people doing something else besides grippers. I think there's way too much emphasis put on grippers. The problem is they're very, very obsessive. You can get very obsessed about grippers. It's kind of like steel bending. You can get really obsessed with steel bending.
Sure.
And, unfortunately, those two things don't really carry over to a lot of other stuff, in my opinion. You'd be much better off training with like some block weights, plate pinches, thick bar stuff, things along those lines. But those aren't nearly as exciting because, you're just dealing with a thick-handled dumbbell and some weights. And what's cool about that, So there's not as much of an allure with like a thick bar training method,
Mm-hmm.
So, yes. But, you'd have to make sure that you train the grippers in a progressive fashion in order to get the most out of it, as opposed to constantly trying to close a bigger gripper or something like that, because that's when you get into the testing mode.
Right.
And it's just not gonna lead to much. And honestly, for arm wrestling, I think there's lots of different things that you can do that would be better for application.
Yeah, I've arm wrestled a lot of people who were very, very talented when it came to grippers and closing grippers, and very, very strong, just crushing strength. And all it really provided me was a great anchor point to wrench their wrist back, because their fingers didn't move, but their wrist moved a whole lot. Yeah,
and that's a good point, because grippers do nothing for your wrist, absolutely nothing. In fact, if people would put more emphasis on wrist, I think they'd probably see better results with their grippers, because for a lot of people, the wrist is a very weak link.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that's definitely one of my weak links. Actually, is some movement patterns with the wrist. So I have a tendency to get beat on things such as like sledge levering, where you have to like stand up, lower it down to your head, and pick it back up to the vertical position.
Mm-hmm.
That movement pattern, the ulnar deviation, is very weak for me. I'm way stronger on radial deviation, especially if it's something that's static. I'm much stronger like that. So, but then the ulnar is just it's like a waste of time. I'm just terrible at it. I get beat all the time. So, yeah. I would stay away from grippers for the most part. Maybe I know there's like Joe Musselwhite used to sell something called or he invented something or innovated something called a finger pressure gripper, which had a flat end on it instead of two round handles. I actually bought one of his prototypes because I kind of thought I was going to be like a collector in addition to a strength training guy, and I haven't really collected anything else, so it really just collects dust. It's kind of something to look at in the gym. It's pretty cool, but it gives you more of the clamping position for the fingers.
Right.
But even with that, I think there's better options. Stuff that Luke makes, for instance, I think are better options for arm wrestling than trying to mess with that gripper. So.
So, do you think? If you're obviously, I know you're not as much involved in the world of arm wrestling as all of us idiots watching the show are. But if you were going to set up like a 2 or 3 exercises that you think would be helpful, particularly for the wrist strength that you mentioned, I mean, what kind of stuff would you give people that are interested specifically in increasing their hand strength without doing the making mistakes that you just talked about with the grippers?
Yeah.
Like other things that you would suggest we would do?
Now are you asking about grip training types of methods? Like something from grip training, grip sport types of methods? Or are you talking about arm wrestling training that would increase your hand strength? Because, there's a little bit of difference.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is if you were giving advice to arm wrestlers on how to improve their hand strength for our sport, what would you tell them?
Well, I would focus on things like thick bar training and probably block weights, and I would look at basically any thick bar lift that you can do is going to be good. I think if you do maybe thick bar rows or thick bar wrist curls, and then maybe thick bar movements where static holds in different positions, different angles, and things like that. I think those would be the best way to go from like a grip training perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Something that you pulled out of grip to use in arm wrestling. I think that would be one way to go. Mm-hmm. I think the next way would be block weights, which are basically any kind of weight that looks like a block. Mm-hmm. So The classic block weight is one head of a dumbbell. Great way to go. So if you ever see a dumbbell that gets broken at a gym, don't let them throw it away. See if you can get that, snag it. There's a million things you can do with that. You can do deadlifts, you can do holds, you can hit it for reps, you can do cleans with it, you can do carries, you can do curls, you can do wrist curls with the block weight. It depends on what weight it is, of course. But the nice thing about it is your hand stays in an open position, and it makes the whole entire hand work much more intensely than something that you can wrap your hand around really well. So I would say those two things would be good. Now, if we're talking about let's say the arm wrestler has a few tools that they've bought, whether it's from Luke or whether it's from some other supplier, and I don't even know any other suppliers. But there's plenty of things. There's plenty of different handles out there that will attach to either a cable station or a band hookup. You basically want to focus on working a variety of ranges of motion, and then also putting especially some emphasis on whatever your weak points are. So wherever you're getting overtaken in a wrestling match, you want to make sure that you're working those angles, those movement patterns, so that you don't get overtaken as much in those parts of the match. And then, whatever you end up doing in your training, then when you have more table time, you get back on the table and start pulling against your partners. If you see improvement based on what you've been doing in your resistance training protocols, then keep doing that. But if you don't see improvement, then you probably want to make a change with that after a few weeks. You wouldn't just want to do the same exact programming, the same exact movement patterns and all that stuff if you're not seeing some improvement on the table. Naturally, if your partner is like light years ahead of you, then it's not going to be the greatest the greatest test to go up against that person. You would want someone that was similar in their development on the table. So those are some thoughts along those lines. Hopefully that was what you were looking for.
Let me ask this about the blob weights. I mean, the block weights that you were just talking about. Do you follow like a similar pattern, if you were on your heavy lifts? Like, do you do sets of like 4 to 6 of picking up a heavy one, or do you think it's more valuable to just pick up the heaviest one you can and hold it for time?
There's definitely applications for all those things. I can say probably there's 4 things that I do. I will try to lift a bigger block weight at all times, or if maybe I'm not peaked on block weight, so maybe I'll have to try to just lift the ones that I've already lifted, okay, to try to maintain that top level strength. So I'm always pushing in that regard. And then I'll also do holds off the ground, holds for time. So those are 2 very common things. I'll take a sub-maximal and I'll do a grip rush. So a grip rush is just what we call a 60-second AMRAP, as many reps as possible inside a minute. And we may do it where we do only the right hand for 60 seconds or only the left hand, or we might switch back and forth, or we might do something where we have 2 different block weights, so we're doing lifts at the same time, or we're cycling back and forth. A lot of times my hands are not even, depending on what training I've been doing, and if I have any injuries or anything, it might be tough for me to maintain the same level of strength in both hands. So sometimes I might need to use 2 block weights during one of those grip rushes. We do those quite a bit, even though I'm not sure how much they increase your top level strength on block weights. I think just the sheer fact that block weights carry over to everything, I think it's a good, reliable method to continue to keep in your training. And then the 4th one is adding weight to whatever your blob that you lift. So even though you're not necessarily lifting a bigger blob, it's a heavier blob because of the weight that you added to it. So I see it as a good method. So those are the 4 main things that I do. But really, you can do pretty much anything with a block weight that you can do with a dumbbell or a barbell. You can clean and press it. You can carry it. You can curl it. Back in the day before I ever arm wrestled or anybody at Diesel Crew arm wrestled, we used to actually set up a wooden table and we would sit on it, or we would lean on it like we were arm wrestling, and then we would hold a sub-maximal block weight, like probably like 50 to 60% of 1 rep max. We would just grip it, and then we would do different ranges of motion, as if we were going through the arm wrestling movement patterns holding a block weight. So that was very taxing, especially at certain angles. So
was that more for health? Was that more for like health reasons, or was it for strength?
Well, it was at the time. What we were doing was we were really trying to see what we could come up with in our training. So we used to have a method of training called end planar movement patterns. And it was more like, instead of just linear movement patterns, lifting it up or carrying it, we would try to move across end planar space. Okay. So trying to just kind of think outside of the box, move it in all different angles. And the objective was to be able to do that kind of stuff with the actual 50-pound blob. So we never got that high. I don't think we put enough time into it in order to be able to do those movement patterns with the 50-pound blob. Instead, I believe it was a half 70 hex block weight. But you could get a good workout, especially when you turned it over so that you were kind of looking at the back of your forearm. It was much more taxing, especially along the back side of your hand. Just thinking about what that felt like back then, it kind of makes me want to try it again, because it was actually pretty tough to do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think all of that kind of stuff probably, I think you're right. I think it applies greatly to our sport, because, I mean, one of the things you hear, it's a constant refrain from everybody we talk to is, fat grips, wide grips, get as big a grip as you can, whatever you're picking up, try to stretch your grip as much as possible, because, you grab people of all different size hands. Some people's hands are very thick, so it's very similar to grabbing somebody with, 2 fat grips on a bar, for example. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And, I mean, I feel like there's probably a disconnect between the two sports, because there's got to be a fair amount of carryover. I mean, I think you're right with the grippers. I don't think those do anything. I mean, it might be a little bit intimidating for a beginner to have someone grab. John said, once you get over that, you can snap their wrist back many times and move on with your life. But a lot of the stuff you do, I mean, the hammer stuff you were talking about earlier that you said is not your best event, that's something that a lot of arm wrestlers do. And they do all kinds of different range of motion stuff with it. So they probably are using lighter sledges than you guys do. But they, people focus on, range of motion with their wrist. And I always wonder, man, I mean, it feels like that's super taxing on your tendons. So I don't know how long you can do that kind of stuff and still gain strength from it.
That's a good question. I dislike sledgehammers so much that I generally end up backtracking in my strength, and I really only train them regularly when I have them coming up in a contest.
Right.
They are they can be very painful, and the one thing that I've noticed, especially over probably the last 3-4 years, is it's almost like I've lost some range of motion, because it gets very, very hard for me to stand there and lever a hammer down to my head and back. It's almost like my hand just doesn't move as far back as it used to.
Right.
And why that is, I have no idea. I have no idea. I mean, I have suspicions, but I can't point to one thing that happened and it stopped working. Mm-hmm. I have pulled on the table with a few dudes, and I know that if I grab, I have pretty big hands, so if I grab onto someone and it feels like I can't get a good wrap around their hand, it definitely gives me a different feeling. So I can't get the same leverage that I can on the person's hand that's much thicker. So there may be some value, I'd say, in trying to get some hypertrophy going with some of the spots in your hand.
Oh,
so
sure. Yep.
So for instance, I'll just share a couple things that you might try. You guys may already know these, but maybe some of the listeners are aware. You can go to the hardware store and you can buy what's called a pony clamp or a carpenter's clamp or anything. It looks like a giant clothespin. And you grip it. I wish I had one right here, but you kind of grip it in your hand like this, and then you try to squeeze it down like that. Now most of these clamps are strong enough that you're not going to get that range of motion, but you can get some range of motion. And what this does, it enables you to build up the thumb pad quite a bit. And I see that as something that you might want to try. Also, if you build up this hypothenar eminence that's here on the pinky pad, man, it feels like you're grabbing onto like a catcher's mitt sometimes when you hold on to someone's hand that's really thick like that. And that's actually something that you might be able to work with a gripper. If you take a really light gripper and instead of holding it so that the spring is up here, you would actually hold it so the spring is down here. So you invert it, and then you try to close it with maybe the last two fingers. And, with the idea of building that pinky pad, but at the same time, you're going to strengthen those last two fingers quite a bit as well. And I've heard lots of people talking about that being, a point of control for them that they've worked on, bringing up those last couple fingers. So those are some things that you might try. Heck, you could probably even use like literally a clothespin, and just work each finger individually and try to get each finger a little bit better at producing its own tension individually.
I like that idea. I mean, and definitely building the size of both the thumb pad and the thenar that's definitely people always mention when you build your hand up and it gets bigger and bigger, it's harder to grab onto, and generally that's obviously a good thing, particularly when combined with proper technique. So it makes sense. There's a bunch of questions coming in. Let me throw a few of these out at you. This question from Paul wants to know how important do you think total body strength is for grip, and do you think there's a similar correlation with arm wrestling?
I feel that full body strength training for grip is just as important as building strength on the implements. I think that far too many people, just based on what they tell me they do in their training, far too many people don't do enough strength training, and they just do grip strength training. And I think it hinders them. I think it holds them back. If you look at all the people who have been national champions, or if whoever won either the Global Grip Challenge or what we call the National Championship now, all of them were full body strength training dudes, every single one of them. So I think it's huge. I think it's extremely huge that to do that. I would suspect that arm wrestling would benefit in the same way. I do know that in arm wrestling, body weight is very, very important. So I think the arm wrestlers would need to really watch their diet and the loads that they're using and the volume that they're hitting and things like that in order to avoid excessive, muscle building. But I think, with a good token basic strength training program where you're actually tracking what you're doing and working to add weight to the bar, I think it can be very, very productive for someone in arm wrestling.
Well, what percentage of the time do you, in your personal workouts, do you devote to grip versus the rest of your body?
Man, it's close to 50-50. I could probably get all of my body training done in about an hour most times. I really like training, so I would if I ever quit grip, I'll probably like go to like 2-hour workouts, honestly. But I would say it's probably an average of about an hour per workout is body, and then an hour is grip, more or less. Depending on what time of the year it is and what contests are coming up, then that balance might get skewed a little bit so that I end up doing a little bit more grip. And then if we're in kind of like an off season or a lull where there's not a lot of contests, then I'll probably do more body training. But it's probably about 50-50, and then we'll skew to like 60-40, depending on what time of the year it is.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. I would say probably arm wrestlers do more of like a 70-30 or 80-20 split in terms of arm wrestling. I mean, training they do specifically for arm wrestling versus everything else. Because there is a belief amongst many that you don't need to work your legs and your core isn't as important. I don't personally subscribe to that. I mean, I don't do a ton of like leg weight training, but I run a lot, and I feel like having strong cardio and just overall body health and coordination is beneficial in a sport that requires so much coordination. And even though people don't think so, having played around with grip stuff for a number of years, I know it requires a lot of coordination as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I feel like that's something that maybe we miss as arm wrestlers because we tend to just focus on the upper body at the expense of the rest of us.
Yeah, I mean, especially, I've watched what Luke does, and I've watched what a lot of guys do, how they really wrap their lower body around the table in order to get additional leverage and stability. Mm-hmm. If the stronger your legs are for that, the better. But at the same time, in order to get that rigging to really pay off, you've got to have a strong core.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's a lot of stuff going on there with the core. I mean, that's defined in many different ways. It's not just doing sit-ups and crunches. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of value to doing multi-joint exercises that are core related. Core training, core strength benefits from doing multi-joint exercises. And then, of course, isolation movements that target the core more specifically, like plank variations and other core static movements that you can do. Those things, I think, would be really big bang for your buck type things for whatever time investment that you're able to make on them. I think you're going to get a lot out of them. I think it's kind of like a lot of grip guys that I've talked to where I think they're leaving a lot of potential strength on the table because they're not developing their strength in a full body sense. And you can really see it if a person goes from like specializing in grip to, well, I'm going to work on steel bending for a while. Steel bending really doesn't require a lot of grip strength. It doesn't, it requires continuity. But, continuity through the wrist and being able to secure the bar and drive through it how you want to. But really the majority of the strength there is coming from the shoulders and the upper torso, the back and chest. All that stuff is highly involved. Mm-hmm. And if you're not blessed with really, really good leverage in your arms, then you're going to have to rely on that torso strength. And if you haven't developed that strength, across the board, then you're going to see struggles when you go to that other type of training. So knowing what I know in just the limited amount of time that I've experienced arm wrestling type training, there's so much going on with the shoulder and everything that controls it. And really, when you start talking about like the lats, I mean, there's lots of fascial connections between the lats and the rest of the core and even the glutes. So yeah, I think there would be benefit to work in the lower body. And just, hey, you know what? If you're a guy that puts on muscle real easily, then you're just going to have to dial back on how much you're eating or something. You're just going to have to track it a little bit better or cut off some body fat.
Mm.
Yeah, in my opinion, I agree with the core strength being overlooked in the sport. And really, in my opinion, the good core strength correlates very well to endurance in our sport. And the reason why is because when we're arm wrestling and we're using basically our torso and our core to keep us in position, a lot of people who don't have a very strong core all of a sudden they're holding their breath because that's the only way that we can get those internal muscles to really, really tighten up, really, really tighten up. Whereas if you have a little bit more control over those than maybe the average person, you can pull super hard and stabilize your trunk and do everything you need to do except for you can breathe while you're doing it. And all of a sudden, there's this, like, people have the same level of power, and all of a sudden this one person just starts taking off. And suddenly this person has, like, incredible endurance. And the fact is just that they can breathe while they're doing this. So they're not beat red. They're not just sitting there holding their breath for 15 seconds and then go, oh, my God, I have nothing left. You know, I really think that in endurance-wise, it really pays off to have something where you can really control yourself and continue to breathe while you're very, very strong where your position is.
I totally agree. Point, man. I totally agree. And, you know, sorry, Jed, I was about to give you something to jump off, but John already did. I was going to say in the strongman stuff that you mentioned earlier, as people have evolved training for that sport, they are all focusing on cardio. They're all jogging because, you know, they're starting to realize how important it is to maintain your strength levels, having a healthy heart and being able to, you know, keep your lungs strong as well.
Yeah, you know what, dude? I'm so far removed from the sport of strongman. I don't know what anybody's doing there anymore. I can help people do it safely, but as far as like what the best practices are in preparing for strongman, I have no idea, brother.
Yeah.
You know, the sport has evolved so quickly since I haven't done a competition since 2006. So, and I haven't gone to a competition since 2006. So I have no idea.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
it serves a reason.
Yeah, it does. That's my point.
Blood.
Yeah, I agree, and I feel like, you know, first of all, it's good for you. Number one, especially as you age, like some of us are. But
I'm not aging.
So there's that. Yeah, you're not aging at all. Well, you got a little ways to catch up to me. That's my main point, because you know I'm going to be 46 in like a week. So you're coming to my birthday party, right?
No.
By the way. All right. Anyway. But I think it's a good thing, and, you know, people argue about it back and forth, but I totally agree with John. And any kind of sport that requires, or at least has a potential to require some endurance, your ability to control your breath is absolutely vital. And so you have to figure out how to do that. And I think John's right in that if you have a strong core and you've focused on it and you have strong lungs, you're going to have a much better time maintaining yourself in a long match. Or like a long hold and gripping, for example. If you have something like the, what do you call the ones with the two giant poles they have to hold on?
The Hercules hold.
The Hercules hold. You can see it makes a difference to people who are breathing and the people who are not breathing.
Yeah. Another example that goes right along those lines is in February we held a contest where we did a hold for time with a pinch block. So it's like a 2-inch wide block, and you add weight to the bottom of it. You just hold it for time. And you know, if you can stand there in that kind of bent over position, but maintain your cool, keep your breathing regulated, it makes the hold so much better. Whereas if you have to hold your breath all the time, I mean, when John brought that up, that's a fantastic point. If you're going to like Valsalva maneuvers after like 10 seconds just to be able to hold on to something, you're going to be struggling when it comes to like a longer match. That's a fantastic point. Speaking along the lines of breathing, this isn't my specialty or anything, but have you guys looked into like Wim Hof method or anything like that kind of advanced breathing type of stuff?
Yes, I have looked into it. I have a bunch of friends who swear by it. I'm not totally sold on it. I mean, I personally feel like that guy is a genetic freak. For those of you guys that don't know it, it's this guy who can first of all, he can hold his breath for a long time, but he's developed a special way of breathing that he claims enables him to endure extreme temperatures, so he can run like a half marathon in Antarctica just wearing shorts and no shoes or socks. And he actually does do it. He doesn't suffer any notable physical maladies from it. But what I haven't seen, Jed, I don't know if you've seen it, you know, it works for him, but I haven't seen it work for any of his students or the people that claim that his system is changing their lives. So that's why I'm a little bit skeptical about it.
Yeah, I don't know any details. I've gone through a couple breathing pattern, you know, exercises with a guy. When I was at Nationals here a few weeks ago, I felt horrible. It easily the worst I've ever felt at a competition. And went outside, and the dude did some breathing exercises with me. Did it help? I mean, I guess it was supposed to be like a reset or something like that. I might have felt a little bit better, but I also got about 10 minutes away and just was able to lay down also.
Exactly.
So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know enough about it. It's just when you guys started talking about, the ability to breathe efficiently, just thought I'd throw that out there. So again,
I think
I'm
it's
not
interesting
sold on it or anything. Yeah.
Well, I think it's a cool thing to talk about because, if you look at the last 10 years of human achievement and across all sports, we've made incredible jumps in a lot of them. I mean, the 2-hour marathon was almost broken. People are jumping further and higher. The athleticism in all the professional sports has reached ridiculous levels, so that now even though people have all these crazy pads on, they can still destroy one another because they've become better at it. And the same thing with arm wrestling. If you look at arm wrestling from 10, 15 years ago versus now, with a very few exceptions like Ron Bath and John Brzezinski, and people that are training now are better. They train faster. I mean, they get to higher plateaus faster because people have starting to figure out how to train for arm wrestling, and it's true across all sports. So I think that stuff is really cool, and it's fun talking about it. And I think in our sport, actually both of our sports, Jed, they're relatively new in the sense of being practiced competitively. Under 50 years for both of us, which is not really a long time when you think about it. So there's tons of stuff we don't know. How much of a difference does cardio make, and how important is endurance in sports like ours? Who knows?
Yeah. It's definitely important because the cardio aspect, because I'll give you one example. At the end of a lot of grip contests, there's a medley. And what that is just a series of challenges, one after the other, and you might have to lift the item up off the ground, or you might have to load it onto a platform, or maybe it's a gripper that you have to close, or you might have to, do a short farmer's carry or something like that. And I've been involved in some medleys where the time limit was like 4 or 5 minutes, and there might be 30 to 50 challenge items in those. And there were times in my career when I was just so out of shape, especially the first 2 years when my daughter was born. I was just not training the way that I could have been, just because I was, so involved with her.
Oh yeah.
And once she hit 3 years old, that's when my training kicked back into a higher gear. That's also when I met Luke, and my conditioning got a lot better, so my cardio was better, and I began tearing up medleys again, just winning just about every time that I went to a medley or finishing very, very high. So it was a lot of conditioning. That's what it was.
Yeah, and it matters quite a bit in arm wrestling too, especially depending on the format. If it's a one-on-one competition, like where it's a super match where basically there's multiple rounds with one opponent. There's been, and there still is at times, a 6-round format. So you pull 6 rounds no matter what. In those kind of situations, endurance, really, you have to be kind of close to the guy. You still have to be kind of close in strength to the guy, but there's been times where, people have gone down 2-0 and then won 4-2 because once the endurance flips a little bit, once that thing flips, it never comes back. A good example would be like Devin Larratt and Andre Pushkar, who Andre beat Devin very quickly the first match, and then Devin actually won 5-1. And there's a popular video on YouTube or on Facebook of the Aussie man that doing like a review of those two, and Devin's just playing with Andre. And people who don't know the sport are like, oh my god, this guy's terrible. Andre Pushkar is one of the best on the planet. In the very first match, he laid Devin out. You just look at the last match, and Devin's just sitting there playing with him because the endurance level is just so much different over 6 rounds. So, especially depending on the format, endurance can be such a huge deal in our sport. And plus, because you have a human being versus a human being, and not 50 pounds versus a human being. 50 pounds is always 50 pounds. There's nobody's going to outlast it, it's because it's gravity. You have a literal, there's a person on the other side of you that has to match up to you. And they're either going to match up less or they're going to match up more. So over those 6 rounds, it looks a lot different. So you better hope that you can at least last 4, in those kind of situations. It's very important.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I got a couple other questions that came in for you. I want to ask you before we let you go because I know you got to get up early. But one of them is, which a bunch of people have been talking about this guy, so I'm going to ask you, what do you think of Tanner Merkel?
Asshole. No, Tanner brings with him a very interesting skill set. He's very, very light, but he's got excellent sized hands. They're not huge hands, but he's got very good sized hands, and he's got a good thumb on him. So it's actually a pretty long thumb, and from what I could tell, he's able to get into a position similar that I am. See how I'm very close to straight across here. Okay. This is a range of motion that most people can't get. Most people get stuck right here. So this enables you to get a much better grip on a really thick handle or a blob. Now, when you take those genetic traits and you combine it with the fact that he's hung off of a rock face for like the last 15 years, and he started when he was, I think he said 15 or 17 or something like that in his mid-teens. I mean, you got an equation there that is very, very hard to beat. When I was 15, all I did was tape pro wrestling and consolidate it to a very, very organized filing system. Okay, that's all I did. All right, I played a couple sports, but as soon as I got home, the homework was finished, and I did pro wrestling. So
that's awesome.
You can't. There's some things that you just can't replace, and experience is one of them. Tanner doesn't have that, but he's got a tremendous amount of conditioning for his hands that nobody else is going to experience. His hands are trained in a way that most people's hands just don't get trained. So, unfortunately, the man is horrible at scope. You guys know what scope is?
No.
Like when you go like this.
Okay.
Oh.
So
that's a tragedy.
Yeah, he's horrible. Horrible at the game. Horrible. He tried to surprise the master when I was out in Texas. He's from Texas, and he tried to get me. I broke it. Never looked, and I broke it. I actually broke it from underneath, so I didn't even just do the punk way and just poke it through. I actually went around and button hooked him. So, yeah. I don't even think he noticed it. That's how quick I was. But yeah.
Well, it's a good answer. Good answer.
Yeah, the nice thing about Tanner is he's a real nice guy too. So
that always helps. It always helps.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like the sports that we do are such niche sports. We all end up turning into a pretty strong, tightly knit community. Maybe with one or two exceptions every once in a while, but usually people get along pretty well.
Yeah, there's always somebody that's really good at becoming the exception to that rule.
Always.
Yep.
So before we let you go, there was a couple questions about grippers, and because people always ask about them, even if, as you mentioned earlier, they're not necessarily the best training tool. Do you have one nearby that you could demonstrate the proper technique for closing them? Because a couple people asked.
The best I have is this Zenith gripper, and I've never really even squeezed it. All right, so it all comes down to placement. I know you're not seeing this real well. Let me see if I can change the angle.
All right.
1 second.
Yeah, take your time. People love to, as you said, they're fascinated with grippers because it's just something cool about being able to close ones that are rated higher and higher. I have that one. That's a cool one.
Yeah. All right, so this is what people do, man. They let the gripper come all the way back here in their hand. All right, and they basically like adduct their thumb towards their palm, and they're trying to hold onto the gripper. Well, unfortunately, you can only use your fingers to pull the handle so far back. And then the further back this handle is, then the further you have to push this handle in order for them to meet. So most people I see have the gripper way too far back in their hand, and to make matters worse, they'll even have it tilted like this.
Yeah.
So now the back handle's pointed even further back. So they're kind of making it really hard on themselves from the beginning. I mean, this right here is like starting with your arm 3 inches off the arm wrestling pad.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Amateurs.
So, right, yeah. So you gotta get the gripper forward in your hand more, and there's actually a lineup method that I use where the back handle splits the pinky. So can you see that? How the back handle, the bottom, splits the pinky, and then the front handle actually splits the index finger. Can you see that?
I see. Yeah.
All right, and then if you move it forward, you want to try to get it as close as you can to the callus line.
Okay.
So the calluses are here. You don't want it on top of the calluses. Nobody's closing grippers like that, but you want to try to get it forward in the hand. That way, it's not back here by the thumb. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So then you try to push that thumb forward. So this movement here also couples with this movement here. See how my wrist is slightly extended?
Yes.
I see a lot of people try to set grippers with their hand like they're about ready to try to chop like a block of ice or something.
Karate masters.
So you got to have it like this. And then from there, it's just setting the gripper and getting it into position and then closing it down. So there are some strength requirements that are needed in order to keep the gripper in that spot, and there's some strength requirements needed in order to get the front handle into position for the actual close. But as far as most people don't even get to that point with the right setup. So they're even if they do everything else properly, because the positioning was wrong, they end up failing. And I all I have to do is watch a 15-second clip on Instagram, because you remember like a year and a half ago, Instagram was only 15 seconds, right? All I needed was those 15-second clips, and I could just about tell you whether or not the person was going to close the gripper just by how they positioned it in their hand.
Sure.
That's good stuff.
Really, that's what it comes down to. No other. You can be super strong in the hands. If your technique's off, you won't close the gripper. And it doesn't matter what drills you do. It just doesn't matter what drills you do. You can do any drill, any exercise you want to, holds for time, reps, strap holds, all that stuff. It doesn't matter if your set technique is off. You're not going to cross a certain point because your fingers just can't generate the strength that they need in order to make those grippers touch one another that far back in your hand.
Technique matters.
Yeah.
Dude, that's like great, man. People, just like arm wrestling. People, we all love messing around with the grippers. Like you said, they may not be that useful, but they're so much fun to play around with. So, I appreciate that, man.
Nothing, right?
Exactly.
It's
exactly
letting your hands get all weak, and then you experience other problems and difficulties in your training. So
I agree. Jed, this has been awesome, man. I really appreciate you spending some time with us arm wrestlers on here, and I think it was very useful for me. I learned a lot, and hope you had some fun, dude.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, and if there's ever like you need to fill another time slot sometime and you can't get anybody else awesome to come on, then you can call me again and have a film show.
That sounds great, dude.
No, we had a great time, man.
Yes, and go to get some rest so you can take care of those clients in the morning, and hopefully we'll talk soon, my man.
Yeah, they don't know what's in for them yet. I got some surprises. They're not going to see me for a few days, so it's going to be a treat for them.
Good.
All right, man.
Excellent. Thank you again, sir.
Thanks. Take care.
Yep. Take care. So that was fun, man. I love talking to people that are a little bit outside of our sport but still have some connections to it, because I feel like there's a lot of carryover, and I like to learn from all these other people out there and maybe get an advantage over everybody else listening to the show right now.
Sure.
Anyway, so let's see now. All right. We decided to stay on here a few extra minutes because obviously people probably have things they want to say about WAL, and we talked about it for 2 hours last week, and it's now John's favorite subject. It used to be steroids, but the WAL is now John's absolute favorite thing to talk about.
Back here.
If you want to have some fun, all you have to do is go back and watch all the previous shows and watch John's body language whenever WAL gets brought up. and you'll see what I'm talking about. He gets extra happy.
It's like, yeah.
Anyway, the update is, I don't know if you guys all saw the update, but the update is it's definitely happening, but there's a couple interesting points. I mean, most of it is, I mean, I do think it's good news that they're actually doing it, and it does suck that there's whatever 1/12 the amount of money, and I think only first place is getting money. But I do think the fact that Frank and Karen Bean and Bart Wood and Travis Bajan all stepped in to rescue the event matters. It makes a big difference in my book, and I think all four of them and everybody else who's helping them, because I don't know everybody who's doing stuff behind the scenes, but those four people obviously we do know. I think it says a lot about them, and I'm really happy they're doing it, because I feel like, as we spoke at length last week, people spend a lot of money, getting ready to travel and buying things they can't get rid of, and I think it's respectful to the arm wrestlers to have the tournament anyway. All that being said, I do think it's strange that they're making everybody wear a WAL shirt. They've said they're not going to stream it, they're not going to broadcast it, so I don't even know what the rationale is for compelling people to wear WAL shirts. They are going to give them away, which I guess is nice, but it still seems strange to me. And Michael, I don't know. Michael Hand just asked, is it officially WAL? That's a good question, which hasn't been answered.
Well, if they're making people wear WAL shirts.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I guess you're right. So it is a WAL event. That it is a WAL event, regardless of what that actually means at this point. I don't know. But I think to answer your question, Mike.
I can't. That's just when I read that part, it's just disgusting to me. There's no other way to put it. People have made this comment of, "Hey, it's gonna be a great tournament and all that kind of stuff." And I agree with you that I'm happy that people who were more or less going to lose everything now have something to do. I think that's great, because it's really tough when you book an entire trip, and especially people from Australia spending thousands of dollars to get over here. At least it's not. I mean, the competition will still be great if people show up. So that's really it's something. It's a big part of what's important. But people have made the comment of oh, it's just a little logo. It's just a little logo. That's the only difference. No, that's the whole difference. That's the whole point. It's just a little logo. If you support that little logo, I mean, this whole thing has been terrible. And then to come through and say you have to wear our shirt. Oh, you have to do this. Oh, how can you tell me I have to do anything? I just think it's horrible. I think it's disgusting. People are still willing to show up to your event, with all these different changes and all these things that fell through, and then you have to do this. Mm-hmm. Don't you think that they may be just asking and stretching just a little further than necessary?
As you mentioned earlier, on Facebook, John, they're compelled to do it because, as you said, they all spent this money, and they have to go because they don't want to throw the money out the window. And so because they have to go, now they have to wear the shirt. And I think you spoke rather strongly about it, and I agree with you. At this point, it's like you guys fucked up. You pulled the rug out from under everybody. Run the tournament, and if people want to wear UAL shirts, or if they want to wear a shirt that says WAL sucks ass, they should be allowed to.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the very best way to go about it? Of course not. And I don't think, but whatever. I mean, but I understand. It's just, there's a certain point where eventually you do have to look in the mirror and go, what am I doing? Seriously? If there's some ultimate goal and there's some, really, something that's really, okay, they're going to pay, X amount every year, no matter what. There has to be some kind of trade-off at some point, right? There has to be a trade-off. And the only trade-off now is if you win first place, you get some money. Which, hey, whatever. But to make these demands, I'm not even judging the people who are going to this tournament to try to make up for a horrible situation. It is what it is. Sometimes you just got to make the best of things. Mm-hmm. So I'm not even commenting on that kind of stuff. What I'm really just commenting on is are you fucking serious? If any one of your buddies did that, if any one of just your close friends did this, promises all this stuff, and then they back out, you'd want to be pissed at them. and you'd be like, what the fuck? And then if they explained it, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I guess we'll just make the best of it. And then they went, oh yeah, by the way, I demand though you wear my fucking shirt that says my name on it. And you go, for what? Are you even streaming it? No, but you're wearing my fucking shirt. You wouldn't treat your friend. You would treat your friend more strongly than people are treating the WAL about that.
Yep.
That's fucked up. There has to be a certain level of integrity here. And if it's not coming from one side, it should fucking come from somebody else, which is the person who is being affected by it. You know, so it's, I mean, it's obviously terrible, but it's just fucked up. And like, I think some people are doing some great things, like what I hear Devin and Todd are offering up their hammers as trophies. Is that correct?
I was just about to bring that up. Brian just pointed it out. Which, yeah, Devin and Tom. So far, I'm Todd are the two people that have said they're going to do that, which I think is effing amazing, man.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if a few of the other guys that got a crap load of hammers would be willing to put some of them up, because again, it speaks to what we were just talking about with Jed. The community is strong, the community is awesome, and there's some freaking fantastic people in there, because those prizes, everybody wants to hammer it, man, almost more than the money maybe. So to offer one of those up just to try to maintain some kind of significant big-time prize is an incredible gesture, and those guys deserve all the applause we can give them for it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think, like you just said, too, like people who are, help pulling this thing together, some of these people are the ones that people stopped attending a lot of their tournaments in order to be the best they could be for these other ones. We should be really thankful that we have people who have been in the sport for a long, long time who are always there. Because, it happens no matter, it's never always going to be, nobody's perfect. But, they maybe should have been supported a little bit better the whole time. I think we should, hopefully, please, God, let them, people have learned that that's what we should have done the whole time.
Well, it's funny because somebody posted that earlier. It's like, there was PAL, and then there was American Arm Fighter, and there's WAL, and there's been a long time series of things like this that have one by one taken away from all the events that you just referred to. And people don't learn. Part of it is necessity. They want to make money, and some people don't have a lot of money, and if they can win 20 grand, it makes a huge difference in their life, so you can't blame them for it. But on the other hand, we have these events that are awesome. People should be attending them. Some of us do attend all of them.
Yes.
And I personally, I love those events just because of everything you just mentioned. These people, when I was a teenager, when I was 16, 17 years old, these people were running those events, and they're still running them. And that means something to me, man. And as Karen posted, any promoter who comes into the sport looking to make money is not going to last. And she's right. They probably put on, I don't know what percentage of their events they've put on and either broken even or lost money, but I would guess it's a high number. But they stick with it anyway. And that's love of the sport, and that's what matters.
Yeah, I think people need to remember, especially people who have been in the sport for a long time, and maybe the people who haven't been in for a long time need to, just maybe talk to people who have been. That you have to realize that people like Leonard, people like Denise, Frank, Karen, Bill Collins, all these guys, they're our family in this sport. They've been here for decades. That's, they've stuck through the bad. They've tried to help out with anything that new that came along. Has it been perfect? Of course not. People want to have a little bit of control because they strongly believe that they do it right. And good thing that they do, because if they didn't, they wouldn't be here anymore. These people, they should always be supported no matter what, because they are the family of this sport. It's far more important than any, flash in the pan, any possible chance at a paycheck. We're not even talking about a paycheck. We're talking about a possible chance at a one-time winning. That's very little when it comes to life.
I'll tell you the mistake we made.
They've been here the whole time.
The mistake that we made as a community is, when WAL came out, let's just talk about WAL, and they started scheduling their big events when they scheduled them. What we should have done is listen, you can't do it then. That's when Triple A's is, or you can't do it then. That's when the USAF Nationals is. So you have to reschedule it. Like, we could have spoken up as a community and said, we love that you're here, but these other events are too fucking important, and you have an entire year to schedule your finals. Don't do it on one of these 3 dates where the other nationals are. I mean, I don't know if they would have listened, but we could have at least tried. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you know how I feel about the USAF Nationals. I mean, it's not that Nationals is inherently better than USAA or AAA's, because it's not. They're all amazing events, as we said numerous times in here. But that is the world qualifier that the WAF picked.
Right.
And I feel like that event should be one that we focus on as a result, so we can have the strongest team possible going to WF. And now that AAA is a secondary qualifier this year, because there wasn't enough people that qualified, or at least that agreed to go from the USAF one, that means people have a chance on July 15th in Battle Creek to go and still make WF team for this year in Hungary and Budapest. And I'm really, really hoping a bunch of people that are at WAL, going to the finals are gonna try to qualify and go, because I think that would be friggin' amazing, and it's going back to the grassroots of arm wrestling in our country, and I think they should do it.
Yeah, I mean, grassroots is a good way of putting it, but another good way of putting it is like, sorry, but the organizations that have stuck through, we had that conversation last week when Alan Fisher called in and said, WAL versus WAF, WAL's offered money and this and that and TV and good, all that stuff. And WAF offers you a medal and a title. And the thing you can take away the most out of that, you can take away those 2 points, but the real thing you can take away out of it is that they've been offering that for a long, long time, and they've never promised any more than that, and they've never canceled, saying, sorry, guys, I know you guys qualified and everything, but there's no Worlds this year.
Mm-hmm.
It's consistent. It's there. It's there, and it's got – I mean, when we talked to Leonard, when we had one of our first interviews with Leonard, we talked about, like, the – reffing and how to become a certain kind of ref and all this kind of stuff. They have a process built that's very, very, strict, and it's been thought through, and there's been mistakes that they've corrected over a long, long time.
Right.
This has been done before, and if you don't know that, like, honestly, most of that stuff I didn't know. I just knew there was different levels of refs. How do you do that? I don't really know. I'm not a ref. And that I think probably most people feel that way, is if I'm not a ref, then how would I know the process, right? And then he explains it to you, and you're like, shit. You don't just show up and like, oh, you're really good today. You're a master ref.
Right.
So all these processes and all these implementations are already here. Mm-hmm. We just have to support them. And how are they going to get, listen, if you want TV and all that kind of stuff, that's well beyond me to talk about how to do that. But, the fact that things have already been implemented and things are already here, and then always consistently trying to get rewritten, and then by the end of it, they always come back to the original rule. Maybe because it took 40 years to make up that original rule. I mean, I don't know.
Not for nothing. I mean, it's Frank and Karen Bean that do the brackets at WAL, so that by itself speaks volumes.
Sure, and if you want to talk about format change for TV and all that kind of stuff, in my opinion, that does need to change for TV tournaments. Arm wrestling tournaments on TV, I don't know how anybody thought that was going to work. Just to be honest, just because it's too hard to keep track of stuff. But like, you never have like a boxing tournament on TV because it's very hard to keep track. UFC didn't really take off until they went to matches, right? They used to have UFC tournaments. Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, how do you film that without having just like a tape of like,
Yeah, it's unpredictable, and sometimes somebody who wins match number 1 is too injured to go on for match number 2, so it's very disruptive.
Sure.
And you're right. It's the super match format that will eventually. I mean, everybody knows that.
Well, the thing is,
you want to watch it.
When everybody talks about TV, like, what do people say? You have to have character development. You have to have this and that, right? And I
X versus Y.
Yeah, and I don't believe they're wrong, but how do you build that with a 15-man class or a 12-man class? It's very difficult unless you
don't do that part on TV. Yeah, I think we said this before. You have the tournaments to establish a top 4 or 5 in each class, and then you televise the super matches between those people over the course of a few months. I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah, you get 12 badasses, and then you have basically 6 series, and then you cut down from there. But I mean,
Arm Wars is successful overseas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody's tried that here yet. I mean, for Christ's sake, if you look at CBS Sports Channel, there's nothing on that channel. You know what I mean? So if you put some super matches in arm wrestling, people are going to watch it.
They did. Igor did it. But I mean,
right.
Whatever about that. But
yeah, whatever.
But I mean, yeah, they did it. It was just, I think it was maybe the wrong mix of, a lot of things, that kind of situation. Maybe they had certain things right that the WL had wrong, and then the WL had things right that the PAL had wrong when it came to being U.S. broadcast stuff. I don't know. Again, far beyond my scope of things. But,
there's an opportunity there, for someone who's smarter than, I don't know if necessarily smarter, but someone who figures out a better formula than the people who've tried it so far. There is, the number of people that watch the show on ESPN or watch Game of Arms, it's a significant number. So there is an audience. It's just someone has to figure out the right way to reach them in a financially, viable fashion. And that's what hasn't happened yet.
Yep.
But
I agree.
Anyway. So I don't know if you guys have anything else that you want to say here that's important before John and I go to bed, but looks like there's a lot of talking about I'm not going to any tournaments until Worlds. I'm learning, not that any of you guys give a shit about this, but I need to take 2.5 to 3 weeks off to be at my maximum strength for tournaments. If I do less than that, then I don't have it, especially endurance, and I don't have the same bursting speed off of the hit either. So I'm just I don't want to take a break of that length. So I'm just gonna go straight through to Worlds and hope that I perform better than I did at Call to Arms a couple weeks ago. And then John's going to Triple A's.
Yeah, so I'll be there. I don't know what weight class, either 76 or 65. I don't know yet. Probably 65.
Mm-hmm. He's going to be in the 65s, and then we're going to be raising money for him to go to Budapest.
No.
So get ready.
No.
We're going to do GoFundMes and Kickstarters and all the things that John loves.
Yeah,
Beg people on the street.
Seriously, I might as well just say it now. I'll probably be taking a bit of an extended leave after Triple A's. Been having some pretty bad shoulder problems recently.
Get it fixed.
Don't really want to go into it too much, but the last 6 months have been pretty tough. I've been noticing a lot of different changes, especially like just watching videos of myself. I'm in positions and I'm doing things, even in training, that I don't know I'm doing until I watch them. So Triple A's will be kind of the last party. So that's why I'm really not sure if I'm going to cut or not, just because I kind of want to have a good time. And then we will be actually committing myself to getting it fixed. However, the doctors see fit, whether it's physical therapy or getting cut open, but either way, because if I don't commit myself to that, I'm just going to keep damaging it, because I really don't have too much concern about damaging it, but I'm trying to be smart, which is
it's rare for you. It's rare for you, but we all applaud you for it. You gotta, we are arm wrestlers, you included, are stupid about it. We injured and we just ignored for a long period of time, but getting it fixed, especially being the spring chicken that you are, you're going to come back like the Hulk, so it's a good idea.
Yeah, it's just you end up, it gets a little old, and it gets a little old when you train, or you go to a tournament and you have hard matches, and you can't take your shirt off without, with both hands. You have to kind of like leave your shoulder down and then just kind of take it off that way. That shit gets old, and like being able to lay on your back and feel your hand, that gets old too. So, yeah, just going to actually get it fixed, whatever that means. So who knows? Maybe I'll see you guys next year. Yes. Left-handed anyway. But yeah.
Michael Hand just posted that 165s is full anyway. So there you go.
Hey, have fun, guys. Is Mike going at 165?
I hope so. He did really well. Yeah, Mike did really well last year.
He's good. For sure.
Yeah, and Worlds is a different animal, and you have to have the right state of mind and right mental framework, I think. And I think those of you who know Mike, he has a pretty flat affect when he comes up to the table, which I think is important, because you can't let the moment take over for you, and he's one of the guys who can handle it. So it's going to be fun watching him again.
Yep.
Yeah, someone just said, welcome to your 30s, John.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's been.
I was just kidding about the GoFundMe. There's no way John would ever do that. He would
No.
rather shoot himself in the face than do a GoFundMe.
I'll take a GoFundMe to get my surgery.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that. Yeah, we'll do a surgery GoFundMe, but not a flying to Budapest one.
Yeah.
There's a important difference there.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's been fun. Kept you guys busy for another hour and a half, so sorry for wasting that. I mean, it's episode 70. Pretty soon we'll be at 100, and you all guys will have wasted, I don't know what, 170 hours with us. That's crazy. Anyway, Hopefully I'm going to try to get Karen Bean or Bart Wood or someone, maybe Travis, to come back on and talk about the event when they're ready to. And until then, have a lovely week. We'll see you soon.
Yes, good luck to everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, have fun, all that stuff.